Have you ever been listening to music and stumble across this one artist that has a style that you absolutely adore? You're just like, man, this is exactly the kind of music that I love. Why haven't I found this group until now? For me, that's how I've discovered some of my favorite artists and musicians. And those kinds of moments can feel really special. But recently, I played a game that made me feel almost the exact same way. It's a game where music is everything, and I loved almost every second of my playtime. Let me tell you about No Straight Roads. No Straight Roads was a game that I had my eye on for a while, but admittedly I never got around to actually playing it until recently when I picked up the Encore Edition release of it on Steam. And while I knew it was likely going to be a game that I was going to enjoy a lot, I was surprised by how much I absolutely loved playing through it. Part of me wishes I had gotten around to playing it sooner, but I'm glad I waited, as from what I can tell, the Encore Edition addressed a lot of the technical issues that the original release on Epic Games and console had, and it's easily the definitive version of the game. You play as Mayday and Zook, a guitarist and drummer that make up the indie rock duo Bunkbed Junction. The two live in Vinyl City, a metropolis where music is directly converted into energy, and the NSR organization enlists the top artists to help power the city. Zook and Mayday audition, and despite performing better than the other contestants, are rejected by the NSR because rock isn't relevant anymore, and the NSR's leader, Titania, enforces EDM as the sole genre of Vinyl City. This results in a complete ban of rock music, and Vinyl City soon goes through a blackout, with energy being designated only towards NSR-affiliated organizations rather than helping the general public. This leads Zook and Mayday to team up and fight against the system by taking down the top EDM artists that govern the city and bring rock back through a revolution. I love this premise so much. It kind of reminds me of Splatoon a little bit with how upbeat and universal are its themes of being colorful and energetic are throughout the entire game. And as a music lover, I love this idea of an entire city being centered around it. And it's awesome to see how every aspect of the game, from the characters to the gameplay, completely embrace the premise. Throughout the game, you can either switch between Mayday and Zook or play the game co-op, with each of the two characters having their own unique playstyles. Mayday's a heavy hitter as she swings her guitar like a battle axe, while Zook is more combo focused, opting for fast hits over strong slow attacks. I've seen NSR's gameplay be criticized a lot for being too basic, and while I agree that it's pretty simple compared to most games, it never felt bad to play. You do get to add some additional spice to your moveset with new attacks and movement options as the game progresses through a skill tree. And while the enemy design is pretty stagnant throughout the entire game, and a lot of the levels leading up to boss fights kind of feel like empty hallways, the game does open up and get more creative with its level design as it goes on. The main moment-to-moment gameplay can be fun, even if it isn't the most impressive or in-depth. But what is impressive is the way the entire game revolves around music. No Straight Roads is an action game that's also part rhythm game, where the enemies, level environments, and even boss fights all follow the beat of the music. Music being directly incorporated into gameplay is easily one of my favorite gameplay concepts. It's why I love games like Crypt of the Necrodancer, and I especially love how it's pulled off in No Straight Roads. While your movement and actions aren't forced to follow the tempo, avoiding and parrying attacks require you to stay in tune, and harder difficulties definitely challenge you to keep up with the rhythm of the song. And when you get into that flow of timing your movements and jamming out with the music, it feels awesome. It also helps that the entire soundtrack is filled with non-stop bangers. The whole OST is filled with fire electronic and rock music that fits the energetic, free-spirited vibe of the game so well. There really isn't a single miss in the soundtrack, and each of the game's main themes for levels and bosses fit their respective characters as well. This is not a soundtrack that you'll forget about after you finish the game. I've had so many of its songs been playing on loop for the past week or so, and I can't stress how much I love it. Like, listen to some of these bops. so freaking good. The execution of the rhythm gameplay isn't 100% perfect. Sometimes it isn't completely clear what beat enemies and attacks are going to follow, and it can get a little bit confusing, especially when there are multiple enemies to deal with at once. But when it works so well, and it's legit some of the most fun I've had with an action game. While this rhythm-centric gameplay is felt throughout the entire game, it shines the most during the game's boss fights, which are easily the highlight of No Straight Roads. I would almost call No Straight Roads a boss rush game, because each of the fights against NSR's top EDM artists are clearly the main attractions with how much detail is put into them. The boss designs are so vibrant and unique, with each presenting different scenarios that play around the idea of music, like the Vocaloid slash VTuber mermaid idol Sayu, or the robot boy band 1010, who sing out their attacks in time to the music in a hysterically auto-tuned voice.
Baby, I'm electrifying. Electrifying!
Each boss also has a different flavor of EDM for their music that fits in line with their style and character design. Boss fights are super flashy and really show off how amazing the game's art style is, with its vivid colors and awesome set pieces. During boss fights, there's a meter that switches between EDM and rock, depending on whether the fight is going in favor of Bunk Bed Junction or the boss. And when the fight starts leaning towards the player, the music will actually shift towards a rock version of the same song seamlessly. It's such a cool effect, and it can feel so good when the rock version of a song starts bumping as you gain the edge in fights. It's really impressive that the artists behind the game put so much effort to make two different versions of each theme that both not only sound great, but also keep the vibe of the boss that you're fighting. Speaking of awesome detail, Mayday and Zook both have an interact button where they jam out with their instruments to activate various objects within the game. You can hold the button for as long as you want, and if you do it for long enough, you'll realize that both characters are actually following the background music. You can hold on to the button infinitely, and both the guitar and drum solos go on for the entire song. The devs went out of their way to record not one, but two other versions with guitar and drum solos for nearly every single song in the game. They did not need to do this at all, and they could have easily have just played a looping sample, because you really only hear these solos in the gameplay for around 1 to 2 seconds at a time. But the fact that they did is part of why I adore this game. It's the little details like that that help make up so much of the experience. Also, shoutouts to the guitarists and drummers for these solos, because they absolutely killed it. I only can imagine how crazy these recording sessions must have been, because these solos go on for nearly 5 minutes at a time, and they go hard. This is also on top of post-launch updates and Encore Edition adding a bunch of new remixes for each boss, which gives more incentive to replay through levels to get a different experience through the music. All of the love and effort put into details both big and small make No Straight Roads such a joy to play through. From the menu UI and sound effects that change from drum to guitar sound effects depending on what character you're playing as, to the expressive album art that you get after you beat a boss fight, where Mayday and Zook take down the artist and stop their show. Can I also take a moment to talk about how gorgeous this game looks too? Because oh my gosh, this game's art style is amazing. It kind of reminds me of Psychonauts a little bit with how wacky the character proportions and color palettes are, but each unique design is so vibrant and expressive, and that energy comes through both in the in-game graphics and the 2D art seen throughout the game. Vinyl City is such an awesome setting for a game, and seeing all of the bright lights, billboards, and different attractions in each district of the city was a ton of fun to explore. The Encore edition of the game also added tons of fan art throughout the city in the form of graffiti, and it makes exploring the world feel so much more vibrant while being an awesome nod to the fans of the game. The world also changes as you play through it, with billboards and signs playing ads for the next EDM artist that Bunk Bed Junction plans to take down, and the city shifting more towards supporting Rock and the protagonist, with graffiti progressively being plastered throughout the city. While it's a little weird that fast travel is locked until towards the end of the game, it didn't bother me having to walk through Vinyl City because of how awesome everything looked. I'd also like to point out that for each interactable object in the hub world, both Zook and Mayday have different responses and comments for every object in the game, and it isn't just throwaway dialogue either, as these interactions help flesh out both the world and the characters' backstories, and again, it's that attention to detail that I love. Speaking of things I love, Zook and Mayday are such good protagonists. Their chemistry is so good together, with Zook's more mellowed out vibe helping balance out Mayday's super eccentric go-get-em attitude. And both of their voice actors do a fantastic job of bringing out their quirky energy. I had such a dumb smile on my face seeing a lot of the interactions and situations that the game does with them.
It's time we fight for fairness, for the people of Vinyl City. We fight for the little guys! Zook, come here. Put your hand next to mine.
Huh? Oh, okay.
What are you doing? Just hold up your pinky finger.
Oh, like this?
Now, put your hand next to mine. No, the other side.
Oh, okay.
A bit more to the right. No, my right.
But I was moving to your right.
No, you just... never mind. Move left.
Like this?
More. Left, 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 left. Yahoo! For the little guys.
One thing that I wasn't expecting from No Straight Roads though was how the story wasn't entirely style over substance. While the game definitely has an overall super upbeat, lighthearted tone, it isn't afraid to actually explore these characters and dive into their struggles. Zook's strained relationship with his brother is a particular highlight, as even though the story of it is told through an over-the-top rap battle rhythm sequence, the way the game deals with tackling their animosity towards each other feels real, and it was fulfilling seeing how the game dealt with these issues. Also, it's really cool how Zook and his brother both speak to each other in Malay. The developers of the game are based in Malaysia, and seeing their culture shine through their work was awesome to see.
Cuma kongsi aja dengan orang kat sini apa erti music sebenar.
Real music?
Kau betul nak buat hal kat sini? Sekarang?
Given the game's super bombastic nature, I was expecting most of the plot to be fun but predictable, especially with the game's ending. I was totally expecting some sort of end where both Bunk Bed Junction and NSR come to the conclusion that rock and EDM are good and end up working together in the end. And while there is a little bit of that, I was surprised to see that there was more to it than just that, and there was a good deal of nuance of how the game handles the situation. I don't want to spoil the ending for anyone, as I do genuinely want more people to experience this game for themselves, but the ending made enough of an impact on me where I did want to talk a little bit about it. So skip to this part of the video to avoid spoilers. By the end of the game, Bunk Bed Junction has beaten every other NSR artist and become the #1 group in Vinyl City, and goes to take down the NSR headquarters led by Titania. Titania's whole shtick throughout the game is that EDM helps bring order to Vinyl City, and I actually like how instead of being an overruling dictator type character, she points out genuine flaws about how Mayday and Zook's plans aren't necessarily going to be the perfect happy ending that they think they are, and there's factors that neither of them considered before they were caught up and rising to the top, like with how them toppling NSR means putting all of their employees out of jobs, and enforcing rock would eventually just bring a new resurgence of EDM lovers, putting Bunk Bed Junction in the exact same position as what they were trying to fight against. The situation's made even more impactful when it's revealed that Titania was secretly, but not so secret because it was kind of obvious in a fun way, the lead of an old rock group that Mayday adored but disbanded, and I like how the game settles the situation with both parties having to form a truce in order to save the city, and And through that, Titania apologizes for creating a system with problems that caused Mayday to start a revolution, while Mayday recognizes that she didn't really think things through or think about the consequences that her actions might have brought. It's a way of making both sides sympathetic without completely invalidating the other. It makes the equalization and acceptance of all kinds of music in Vinyl City feel even more earned, and it especially makes Mayday's decision to not join NSR at the end of the game more impactful. Her decision to stay as an indie group took me by surprise because it was a moment of character growth that I genuinely wasn't anticipating, and it really stuck with me, as her reaction that fame isn't what she truly wants, but not yet fully coming to terms with what she does and trying to discover that felt real. And that's where No Straight Roads really comes together for me, because finding and playing through it really felt like discovering that one artist that not many people have heard of, but absolutely speaks to you on nearly every level. It's not the most polished experience, and if you're looking at just the basic gameplay, there are games that have more depth in them, but the heart and soul that's emanating from nearly every corner of this project is so enjoyable that I walked away from No Straight Roads so satisfied with my time with it. It has nearly everything I love in an aesthetic. Its characters and the way it intrinsically ties music to the gameplay is so unique that it felt like a game tailor-made for me. This game absolutely deserves to be checked out by more people, and if you haven't yet, I highly recommend picking up Encore Edition on Steam. This is a game that deserves to have more fans. It's an experience that has such a unique voice to it that I couldn't help but rock out to. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching me ramble about games that I love, definitely like and subscribe. It really helps a lot. I have a lot of content planned, not only for YouTube, but for a lot of my other platforms too, like Twitch and TikTok as well. So definitely give those platforms a follow too if you like what you see here. And I will be back making a lot more consistent video uploads for throughout this year. So definitely stay in tune if you want. And yeah, that's it from me. Take care, guys.